Everyone, I am Pastor Justin Spurlock, and this is Pastor Danny Hillier, and we are excited to start these weekly sermon reflections looking at the scripture texts as well as our sermons from the previous Sunday. And so this past Sunday, we were in Isaiah 60, verses 1 through 6, as we start a new sermon series. It's all about the sacred and how do we uncover the sacred. And I really loved this text for a few reasons. One, the first part says, "Arise, shine, your light has come." And I love that command. I love that instantaneous action piece of it. Let's jump into this. Get up on your feet. Your light is happening right now. And as we begin a new year, loved that whole piece right there. The second piece for me, and I mentioned it in my sermon yesterday, the humorous part is one of the blessings in the text is, may you be covered with camels. Right? And I literally the visualization there for me is huge. What does it mean to literally cover a person, a thing, a land, a house, whatever with camels, right? This is not a blessing that we would use in the modern day to talk about things, and yet helpful visual, right? Mm-hmm. May you be covered with camels, and talking about what does wealth look like and what does blessings look like. And so for the ancient people to have your land covered with camels would mean that God's bringing dumping all the blessings on you, right? And so as we're entering 2025, I'm trying to imagine what does it mean for me to anticipate God's blessings on a camel dumping level in my life, right? What would it be like for me to be what if that was my expectation? What if I believe that God's light is going to shine in my life in 2025 in such a way that it's a giant covering of camels in my life?
Giant covering of camels.
Right? Yeah. No. What about you, Danny?
Same kind of thing. When I first read the text, I loved the command, the invitation to arise and shine. What a way to open up a prophecy, what a commandment, a invitation for people to welcome into the present moment. And as we're going through this Epiphany series of uncovering sacred, and specifically yesterday we talked about the sacred now, and I read that text and it immediately connects for me to rise up in this very moment, to shine in this very moment. And I can imagine the prophet Isaiah preaching to the people, saying, now is the time to arise to the sacred occasion of right now. And I said yesterday in my sermon that, thousands of years ago, the most important moment was that moment of Isaiah preaching, just as right now is the most important moment of our history. And yesterday, on Sunday morning, when we were preaching the sermon, that moment in time was the most important moment. So I feel the deep connection with the text to draw us into the sacred now and into the moment. And there was also a moment in the passage, something like mentionings of camels and land and sea, and for me that really drew the text to cover the entire creation of God. And that's where my sermon went beyond. I went into the galaxies and talked about everything that God has created. And I imagine in that moment Isaiah preaching, saying, look at all this that God has created, talking about wealth, but talking about it in a way of abundance of life and creation that God calls us to in this very sacred moment right now.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. So in this sermon reflection, we are going to start with our heads, just like we did. What does this make me think about? We're going to move into feelings and emotions, and we're going to help you all explore how we enter into our emotions, and then we're going to end with this whole piece of our hands. What are the actions that we can take this week to implement this scripture text in our lives? And so, Danny, tell us about feelings.
Yes, we've got two feeling wheels here. You obviously can't read them on camera, but we will get you a larger version. Just really interesting, because when we come to church, when we greet people, we usually ask, how are you? And I can think of three responses. I'm fine, I'm good, I'm here. And what we hear, or I'm standing is what we hear a lot of people say as well on Sunday mornings. But more importantly, we're feeling a lot more than just fine. We're
Yes.
feeling a lot more than just okay. And when we're saying I'm here, there's a lot more emotion happening within. So our goal in uncovering the sacred is to also invite us to uncover our heart's feelings, uncover what's really underneath the surface level I'm fine. And so as I look through, the outer edges of this wheel, it says I'm angry, I'm joyful, I'm scared, I'm powerful, peaceful, sad, all these emotions that we can quickly name because we're familiar with. But then as you go into the depth of the circle, there's other types of emotions of I feel left out, I feel overloaded, I feel safe, I feel loved, and we really want to help one another to name the emotions that we're feeling, especially as we read in ancient texts, especially as we talk about the sacred now and this sacred life that we get to live. These emotions are sacred, all of them, from scared to left out to purposeful to energetic. So when I read that text and I reflect on my sermon yesterday of the sacred now, man, I'm drawn to the two categories of powerful and joyful. Specifically, I feel great energy and great purpose when I read the text and reflect upon the sacred now, because it reminds me that I'm a part of something so much greater than I can even comprehend.
Yeah.
Diving into the depths of, yesterday I talked about cosmology and stars and galaxies, and I talked about the anatomy of the human body, that the cellular level and God's creation in all of that, in all of the science and research. And when I read on that, yes, there's an overwhelming aspect to it all, but there's deep purpose and there's incredible energy that I get to be here. I get to be in this present moment. I get to have air in my lungs while I also get to observe the changing of seasons, days and nights, and the moon and stars. So all of it gives this stirring of energy within me and deep purpose.
That's awesome. Let me take a look right here, because all of that, there's a piece of it that makes me feel powerful and excited, right? I'm pointing here on the chart, actually. Like she said, you can't read it probably from right there, but there's so many words right here. But excited also is right next to this next section here about being scared, which the word right next to it is anxious, right? So I'm both excited and anxious for what this means for my life. What does it mean for God's light to shine and to anticipate blessing and to be in this now? And I'm energized by it, but I'm also like, is this real? Is this possible? The last couple of years have been a little crazy around the world, and I've had a lot of things in my own life in the last few years, and I'm looking at the year ahead and going, what if? But what if it's always a little scary too? Because what if I don't achieve it? What if I fail? What if I'm not enough, right? All of those things. And so I'm really holding on to that first line, like, arise. Arise. Okay, like, well, let's get up. Let's see if we can make this happen, right?
Yeah.
And then realizing I don't have to make it happen, right? Like, God's light is shining on me. I just have to be still and be in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And allow the holy now to really become a holy wow.
Holy wow.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So that makes me then think about, like, what can I do to enact this text this week? And it may sound a little contradictory, but I think my action this week really is to stand still and allow that light to shine like a spotlight and go, this now is what is important. Because my brain's always in the future, as you know.
Yes.
I'm always thinking about what's next, and sometimes it's like the next hour, and a lot of times it's like the next 3 years for me. And so I can often go to this place where I'm just in the future. And so for me, the action is, okay, what's the moment? What's the present? What's the now that I need to be attending to and present to, and allow that light to shine and take notice, right? And actually see and hear, and maybe God actually wanting to reveal something here and now rather than for the future for me. What about you?
Yeah, same kind of thing with the right here, right now. I think, as you said, a lot has happened in our world, a lot has happened in our communities and in our own personal lives that 3 years from now, to me, is overwhelming. Even a year from now is overwhelming for so many of us. There's that energy and excitement, but there's that great worry about what if, as you said. So when I think of practical, when I can put the sermon yesterday, the sacred now, the text, Isaiah, into an actual, practical, everyday thing, I think of simple things, like getting out of bed.
Yeah.
And for some people, they kind of, you laugh that off. You're like, oh, get out of bed. But that's a big task.
Yeah.
There are days when you just want to pull the covers over your head and you don't want to see or hear about anything going on around the world. I know for me, when I watch the news headlines, it becomes very quickly worrisome and overwhelming. And I have to remind myself, what can I do right now? What can I do right now to make a difference in the world? And more often than not, I'm not going to make a difference across the globe, but I can make a difference in my kids' lives, in my husband's life, in my neighbors' lives. I can pick up the phone and call a loved one that I haven't talked to in a long time. So thinking of very practical steps that can enhance the moment right here, right now. There is some fulfillment and purpose in that, reminding myself that I'm contributing light and goodness into the world. And there's also that side of it that is worrisome and anxious about the future, but knowing that right now, what I do with my time, with my energy, and sometimes it's just a smile at somebody at the grocery store. Have you ever noticed how grumpy people look at the grocery store?
Me.
Yeah, Justin. People need people to smile at Justin. So just practical things, smiles, handshakes, hugs, phone calls, being present, as you said, putting our phones away, turning the television off, and just being with whoever we have the opportunity to be with and around in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think it goes back to that first word that you mentioned. It's arise, right? Get out of bed.
Get out of bed.
Right? Sometimes that is the only thing required, right? For sure. Do you want to mention something about Rob Bell's book?
Yes, so for this sermon series, the Epiphany sermon series, we're going through Rob Bell's Everything is Spiritual. Now, Rob Bell is one of those names that you mention, and it is very controversial.
Yep. Every time.
Yeah, every time. But something about this book calls forth exactly what we're trying to tell one another and remind one another that it's not just coming to church that is sacred. It's not just participating in communion that is sacred. It's not just the moments of our baptisms and our wedding days and all these big life events that are spiritual, but indeed everything we do is indeed spiritual because God's presence permeates everything that we do, whether we're driving to work, dropping our kids off at school, preparing a meal, sitting with a loved one. Everything is covered with God's presence. Everything is in God's presence is in all of that. So just reminding us of that. And if you've never read, it's just one long conversation. It's it's a monologue from Rob Bell about his ministry, his life, and how he awakened to the reality that himself as a pastor, he realized everything outside the church walls was even more spiritual than what he was creating inside of the church walls.
Yeah. Makes sense. I love it. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this first sermon reflection. We'll be with you next week. And if you are in the midst of taking the Daily Faith Challenge, we have different videos for you all week long. We hope that you'll join in with us. Thank you.
Thank you.